Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Julie from StoryADay here. And if you've been reading my emails this week, you'll know that I was talking about the power of celebrating ourselves this week. I was talking about the Olympics and how so many people achieved so much and they didn't do it by waiting to be congratulated when they stepped onto the podium. They built celebrations into every stage of their pursuit of excellence. And I made a not very subtle plea for you to do the same in your writing life. So if you haven't read that, you can read that over at the blog. I'll put the link in the description. And I talked about how much courage it takes to actually celebrate your own successes. We're raised in a culture that doesn't encourage us to blow our own horns. So I shared some triumphs from our triumph thread in the Superstars group, and I encouraged you to come over to the blog and leave your own celebration of something that you've done to advance your writing career or your writing habit or your writing practice in the last little while, or something that you plan to do going forward. So do check out that link in the blog. As I was writing that post, I started thinking about some other things in examples from life that's a little more everyday than Olympic gold. And I was just thinking back to raising children. I have 2 kids, and when they were very little, I was learning how to be a parent from them. And just by watching them, I could see how much more effective it was to praise and celebrate when things went right than to freak out when things went wrong. I saw other people, when the kids were learning to walk, I saw other people freak out when the kid stumbled or toppled down a step onto a carpeted floor. And then the kid got frightened and cried and was more hesitant going forwards. Whereas our approach was always much more, whoa, that was impressive. Whoops-a-daisy, up you get, you're fine. And turns out that worked out. Another thing that I did when my kids were little, I tried to give them skills that were age appropriate. I tried to give them things to do that were slightly beyond what they had done before, so that they could do it, but I did it in an age appropriate kind of way. So I wanted to stop having to, frankly, being selfish, I wanted to stop having to leap up every time they wanted a drink. And so I taught them the life skill of pouring themselves a cup of water when they were quite little, but I didn't sit them down at an antique, irreplaceable dining table with a highly varnished finish and a ceramic pitcher and my favourite crystal glass and say, have at it. No, I gave them a plastic cup and I showed them how to work the spigot on the fridge, and we went from there. And when they inevitably spilled water, they were spilling it on a tile floor, and I was able to again go, oh, look at that, you spilled it, here's how we clean that up. Now, I'm not saying I was a perfect parent and never got angry and never failed at any of this stuff, but what I want to highlight is the fact that allowing children to succeed and notice when they're doing something right empowers them, encourages them to be more courageous and to try more things that they're not very good at yet. And our inner writer, humans in general, I don't think really ever outgrow that essential humanness of being like a little kid. We learn stuff, we get some wisdom, we know that touching the hot ring on the burner is going to burn us now, so we don't do that anymore. But not everything that's scary is dangerous. And our brains want to keep us safe, so it warns us not to do the scary stuff. But we have to do the scary stuff, especially if you're trying to do something untried that you have never done before. Write a particular story. You've never written this particular story before. No one has. You know how to write in general. You know how to, you might even have a good grasp on story structure and character formation and all of the individual skills of being a writer. But you've never written this particular story before. So it's scary. And there's no beaten path. And that is part of the challenge, part of the fun of it. Because if you were just writing to a complete formula, you'd just be copying out other people's work. And we're not doing that. We're trying to create something new. So it's scary. And just like a little kid, our inner writer really benefits from having a cheerleader on hand to notice when it's doing well. To notice, hey, you got to your desk today. Hey, you finished this chapter. Hey, you really did a good job with that character. Ooh, that's an interesting twist. There's lots of things that we're going to be looking for in the revision process to make better. And we are trained to spot the things that aren't working and change them. But I don't think we spend enough time training ourselves, or nobody really told us after we leave that shell of little childhood, probably when we get to puberty, that sort of middle school, early high school age, when they start expecting us to be more intellectual and they train us to spot what's wrong. It's a rare teacher who remembers to remind us to celebrate what's going right in our writing. And we also at the same time have the societal pressure of not blowing your own trumpet, not seeming too arrogant. Just don't put yourself, don't praise yourself too much. It's unbecoming. And so I'm here this month to remind you that fundamentally as humans, we are a little bit skittish. We're a little bit scared of stuff that's dangerous, and forging a new path through the undergrowth of a story is a little bit dangerous, is a little bit scary, and we need our cheerleader. And if you have writers around you who will read pages for you and cheer you on, that's great. And I thoroughly encourage you to get that if you don't have it. But maybe even more important, you have to do it for yourself. Because there will be times when you don't have those people around. You can't really rely on everyone else. You don't want to become an energy vampire, always saying, is my writing any good? Is my writing any good? You can do that. It's a little bit of the time. We all understand it. It's a vulnerable thing. You need to be able to do it for yourself as well. So I am encouraging you to catch yourself doing things well this month. Modern behavioural scientists are starting to study this phenomenon. They're starting to look into things like grit and resilience and to break down what makes those things real, what the behaviours look like when somebody is resilient, and what the beliefs look like when someone is resilient, and what outcome it has for the things that they try to do. And they have shown that people with resilience get a lot further than people who maybe even start out with advantages in life. So the characteristics of resilience and resilient people are, checks notes, first of all, an attitude not that life is unfair and you ought to be getting this and you ought to be getting that, you're owed something by life, but that life is supposed to be challenging, and that challenge is where we learn and grow. So resilient people have that as a fundamental belief, and you can adopt that belief. If you find yourself sick of hearing yourself whining about life being unfair, you can stop and think to yourself, actually, it's in the challenging moments where we grow. So I want to see challenge as something that actually excites me and helps me grow. Because I think as a creative person, that's probably true of you and built into you anyway. Another thing that helps people be resilient is simply making a commitment. It's not simple to make that and stick to it, but if you make a commitment that you're going to follow a thing through to the end, you'll start to find ways to do it. So that's why things like StoryADay May and NaNoWriMo work. Because if you say, I'm going to write a novel of 50,000 words in the month of November, and you surround yourself with other people who are doing it and who notice if you're giving up on that commitment, it's much easier to do it because you find a way to get to the end. You're not promising to write a good novel in November or 31 good stories in May. You're promising just to write them. And that's the commitment you're making. That's the commitment that you've stuck your flag in the ground and said, I'm going to do this thing. It becomes a lot easier to actually do it if you make that commitment. You can't commit to everything and you can't prioritize everything, but making the commitment is part of the kind of resilience and stick-to-itiveness that gets people to the end of projects. And the third characteristic of people who are resilient is they ask themselves, what in this situation can I control? They don't say, oh, everything's out of my control, everything's against me, life is so hard. Yeah, life is hard and there are things that are against you and there are things that are out of your control. But if you want to be a resilient person who gets to the end of projects, you want to cultivate this sense that there are things that you can control and to look for them and to decide that, yes, you're going to take control of this part and focus on that, and not spend too much time worrying about the stuff that you don't control. So those are the characteristics of a resilient person. What strategies do they tend to use to act on those characteristics? When it comes to seeing things as a challenge rather than something that's just happening to you passively, I think we creative people have a real advantage here, because an attitude of problem solving and a strategy of problem solving is something that is a feature of resilience. It's something that we thrive on. Creative people love problem solving. Once the problem is found, we are less likely to continue with the project, or maybe why so many of us have trouble keeping up an organisational system as opposed to setting up an organisational system. Problem solving is fascinating for us. So that's one of the markers of people who get stuff done. So you're already a third of the way there, if not more. So yay for creativity. Another strategy that people use to help keep them on the path to doing what they want to do, to triumphing, to being successful, is to surround themselves with a community of people who are supportive. You may not have that in your family of origin, you may not have that in your family that you chose to set up and create, but you can find it in friends, you can find it in colleagues, you can find it in, for example, for us, writers groups. And having that support around you to buoy you when things are hard helps you to stick to your commitments. Again, I'll go back to StoryADay May. There's a reason that there are, I set it up as a public challenge with blog comments and had a community for a while. And now we have a smaller community within Superstars that really keeps each other going when things are tough. So it helps each other to stick to their commitments. It's why NaNoWriMo always had forums, because everybody who writes seriously for any length of time understands that having people who know what your commitments are and help you stick to them is really helpful. And the third thing that resilient people do, the strategy that helps them get to the end, is what's called beneficial self-care. And this one is a tough one, because this one is another one that I think society has encouraged us to think of as either weak or self-indulgent, but really we don't get anywhere without self-care. If you sit at your desk for 12 hours a day trying to bang out words, your back is going to seize up. You're going to need to stretch. You're going to get RSI if you don't stretch. Having strength in your back muscles is important if you want to sit at your desk. It sounds ridiculous for such a sort of sedentary activity. It actually does require some physical strength. We need to drink lots of water, stay hydrated, stay healthy, eat healthy foods that feed your brain. We actually do need to do self-care. We need to sleep enough. We need to go for walks outside, or go for rolls if you're in, if you use a wheelchair, go for a roll. We need to move ourselves. We need to see new things. We need to take time to care for ourselves, socialize with people who love us. Beneficial self-care is not self-indulgent. It's a powerhouse of resilient people. It's a strategy for getting things done. And we really can't white knuckle our way through life for very long. The more we learn about the body, the more we know about, cortisol levels have all these negative effects on our health. The stress hormone has all kinds of negative effects on us. Deadlines are good, but they're not good because of the stress they impose on us. They're good because they reinforce the commitment that we've made to ourselves. And they're probably a kind of public, i.e. community-based thing. So the sort of macho, white-knuckling, toughing it out version of productivity is being systematically dismantled the more we learn about how humans actually operate. The same way that people used to think, if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. But now we've looked at what really motivates people, and it's praise. It's a sense of empowerment. It is encouragement that makes people excel. Likewise, on a personal level, taking care of yourself isn't self-indulgent. It's necessary. It's going to help you excel, which in turn is going to help other people benefit from what you offer. I'm not saying you have to start training for a marathon. I'm not saying you have to go on a strict eating regime where you never have any treat food or never drink a Diet Coke. I'm saying balance some of those things with some slightly healthier choices because your body needs the fuel. Don't think you can never slump on the couch and binge watch Bridgerton. Sometimes you have to get up and move and stretch and maybe lift something heavier than a pen. So my point is, this week, I'm encouraging you to celebrate yourself, celebrate everything you do, but also to adopt both the attitudes and the strategies of people who seem to be effortlessly successful. They've either got these things built into them or they've been taught them and they've had it reinforced by a smart family or coach that they encountered early in life, or they've consciously decided to adopt these characteristics and strategies. And you can do that too. Know that challenges make us stronger, that creative people love problem solving. Know that a community makes it easier to stay accountable to the commitment that you've made to yourself. But you have to make a commitment to yourself and to your work first. And that none of this is all or nothing, that self-care, beneficial self-care is important and that we deserve it. I hope that you will celebrate yourself this month and that you will come over to StoryADay and tell me what you're doing. Share with the community the tiniest thing that you're doing to celebrate your writing, the tiniest success that you've had. It's hard to toot your own horn. This is a safe place to do it. We'll be thrilled to hear it and we'll be inspired by your words to do something nice for ourselves too. So think of it as giving. That's what I have for you this week. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you have, you share it with someone. Make sure you're subscribed and come over to the blog and leave a comment. But most of all, keep writing. Thanks for listening. Why not come over to the blog at storyaday.org and check out this week's writing prompts and articles. And in the meantime, have a great creative week and of course, keep writing.